This is Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, Simin Ches, Sif Yud through Yud Beis, the middle of Yud Beis. Apologies for the lateness of the Shirim, B'siyat D'Shmaya. We're going to try to get back on schedule, having the Shirim up the night before. And as I'm sure many of you looking at your screen, you'll notice that there's a bit more clarity on this Mishnah Berurah. Baruch Hashem, we were able to have Dirshu that send us this Mishnah Berurah, and hopefully going forth, we'll be able to have all the pages in much more clarity, which should aid in the Shir as well. So says the Mechaber, you put on a talis katan while your hands are not clean, something that we've spoken about. Because we already mentioned that you want to put on your talis katan right away in the morning. But wait, your hands aren't clean. So what are you supposed to do? So says the Mechaber, as we turn over here, says, Yilbeshanu, you know what you should do? You should wear the talis katan, beloi bracha. Put on that a bracha. And then what do? When you wash your hands, you move around, you fix the tits a little bit, and then you make the bracha. When you put on another talis, you make a bracha on that. You have kavanah to be pater up this. In such a scenario, you don't have to actually deal with the first one because you're making a bracha on the second one. And of course, someone who's putting on a talis katan, talis gadol, which we're going to deal with a lot today, in that scenario, this was what one would do. It'll make the bracha on the talis katan, and it'll pater up his talis katan. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Sif katan chav gimel yemashit b'titis, tevizeh yechashiv ksas kilu lav shayaz. Because when you move your tzitzis, and this is the longest, I'm sure many people wondered, we know we have this did by tefillin, we have this did often, you forget to make a bracha on tefillin, then what do? We say you move your tefillin. Over here, you move your tzitzis. What does that help? So Mishnah Berurah teaches us, you know what helps? It considers it a little bit as if you put it on right now. As we've spoken many times, you have to make the bracha right before you put it on. The talis when you're holding right before you put it on. The talis katan when you're holding right before you put it on. Like we know by tefillin when you're holding it right before you tie in the knot. Over here, you as a person are not able to make a bracha. Your hands aren't clean. So that's the reason why you'll put them on and make the bracha afterwards. But we said if you put on another beged, you make a bracha on that beged, and you have kavanah intent to be battering up the first beged. Says Mishnah Berurah, liftar. Here it is. And that's what we do. We make a bracha lisativ batitzis on the talis gadol, and we pater and we exempt the talis katan. And says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hachi adiv, and this is better. It's fami mashenagim mizanashim more than some people do. Shevarchan al talis katan v'teikim varchan al talis gadol. So certainly that one should not do. That case is not going to change. One should certainly not make a bracha on the talis katan and right away talis gadol. The shaila is going to be right now, what's right away? How quickly? Meaning, if someone, let's say he's davening at home, and he gets dressed, talis katan, 1 minute later, no talking, no anything, talis gadol, no shaila, says the Mishnah Berurah, one bracha on the talis gadol. The question is going to be, as we're going to see throughout today, that let's say you're going to shul, you might talk in between, there might be a bit of a hefsek, maybe those cases will be different, but we're going to see that in general, as long as you're on the road, you're getting dressed, and you're going straight to shul, in those cases we're going to say, just give up sakalach now before we get confused, in those cases you're going to make one bracha on the talis gadol and pater be talis katan. If there's a substantial amount of time, some place can want to say you're sitting and learning beforehand, you're doing something beforehand, taking care of the kids perhaps, then yes, you would make a bracha on the talis katan and later on the talis gadol. Mishnah Berurah continues and says, why do you not make two brachas? It's not a bracha levat Torah, it's just a bracha she'inot tzricha, it's not necessary. Reason number one. Reason number two, v'oid, afilu im yafsik zman merubin, if there's a long time talis gadol, kama badmin, issue number two says Mishnah talis katan. Sometimes you can't make a bracha on it. It's not open entirely. I do katan meshir. It's too small. Like as we'll get to. I do yashiv abalayla, or you slept in it, so you can't make a bracha on it. So three different reasons: either because you're putting it on right away, or because it's not roi to make a bracha. It's not open enough. It's too small, or you slept in it. Says the Mechaber Sif Yud Aleph. Iker mitzvahs talis katan katan lelav shai al begad. You should wear it on your clothing, like the Hasidim do. Kadesha tamid yireu v'yizkar mitzvahs. So you should remember the mitzvahs always. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ubaksavim isa the mekubalim right the talis katan tachas begadav. Should be underneath your clothing. Because Magen Avraham dakapanim zarach shiyat tzitzis mibachotz. But the Magen Avraham points out, and this is where the makar comes, that many wear their tzitzis out. Not like those that put it inside their pockets, that put it into their pants. Which of course, this is where the minhag started from. Mishmur says, if you go amongst the goyim, then you could tuck in your tzitzis. And that's of course with the minhag, and many people continue such a minhag, that back in Europe, they're going amongst the goyim, so they tuck their tzitzis in. And therefore, that's the reason why, even though the Mishnah Berurah paskins you should wear your tzitzis out, many people don't, and they base it upon the fact that they have a minhag. This is what Klal Yisrael did, even if the reasoning doesn't apply, which might not be so simple. While you're making the bracha, of course, you see the tzitzis amount of time to walk Dalet Amos. You're to see it. You should look at the tzitzis and remember the mitzvahs. You put in their pants. Number one, they're hiding their eyes from seeing the tzitzis. Number two, they're disgracing the mitzvah, the commandment of Hashem Yisbarach. Very strong wording of the Mishnah Berurah. They're going to give judgment upon this. You know what they say? They're going amongst the Goyim. Says Mishnah Berurah, for that, just put your tzitzis in your pocket. What do you have to put into your pants? Mishnah Berurah over here is very angry at those that continue the minhag of wearing their tzitzis in. And Mishnah Berurah now continues his musar by teaching us, Vilu hayolahem, is a dara in Melech of someone had a present from the king Bas Vadam Shechakulav Shema Melech, and on the present it was written the name of the king. Kamaya Miskashtin, but you would adorn himself with the Lefnei Nashim Tam in front of people. Kal v'chaymer b'tzitzis, and certainly with tzitzis Shemaramis Al Shema Melech Malchei Amlach Hakadosh Baruch Hu Min Sif Chavdal Sif Hey. So the Mishmur says tzitzis show Hashem. You should wear them out for everyone to see. Kama Miskabed Adam Anaisi Shemayalav. How honorable is a person to do this? Amru Chazal Hazar B'tzitzis Zoycha V'Ray B'nei Hashchina. Now the Mishmur teaches you the incredible reward. They're going to see the Shechina if you're careful with the mitzvah tzitzis Mashem and Aksavim Ksuvim Tayehudi Sheshar Leizketi Amitzuyanim Mitzazu. When you're around at the end of days, those who are careful about tzitzis Kimod Dechsevu Bo Asar Nashim Kol Hashenis Agoyim V'Chzika B'Knaf Ish Yehudi. The Goyim are going to have tens of men grab onto each corner of the beged, and we will see that this is where it's going to come from, the wonderful hundreds of servants that we're going to get from being careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis. Oh, sorry, it's right here. 2,800. 7 times 4 is 28, and that's how they get the number of 2,800. 2,800 servants. So that's Mishnah Berurah Shita. We see very strong Yod Yishmer Yitzitz out. Again, we mentioned there are different minhagim. There are those that wear it in because that's how they did it back in Europe, and therefore the minhag does not change. But of course, that's the Shita of the Mishnah Berurah. And now we continue over here in Sif Yud Beis. Says the Mechaber, yesh lekam v'gadim shel arba kanafos. You have many garments of 4 corners. Kulam chavetitz. You have to wear tzitzis on all of them. V'im lasha kulam b'lei hafzik. You put them all on one after another. V'yadayitay mitchila al kulam. Important, and you're thinking about all of them. Leivarich al bracha achas. You only make one bracha. But v'im mafsik b'neihem. If you made a hafsik, then sarch levarich al kol achas, then you have to make a bracha on each and every one. So we stop over there. That's where Dirshu stops for the day, and it's a bit lengthy, so it's good to stop there anyways. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, if got the chavzayin, you have many begadim, they'll have to put on tzitzis kul chayavim ratzalayim arim lav shekulim. If you wear all of them, important. No one has to think that they're not allowed to keep a 4-corner garment if you're not wearing it. Which, of course, and if the tzitzis are sitting in your closet, you do not have to put tzitzis on them. It's not a chiyav, not an obligation on the garment, but rather on the person. This is a little bit of a chiddush Because we know, for example, by Tfilas Kalim, we find that one is not supposed to keep around the Kalim that's not Toivel because we're afraid to even come to use it. I guess the answer is when it comes to Tzitzis, it's a Chiyuv that we're not as nervous. But either way, the Mishnah Berurah says one does not have to be concerned. A long hafsik. A little bit of hafsik. If you're just quiet, it's not called a hafsik. If you waited an amount of time, but if you didn't talk, we basket, it's not a hefsek. So if you wait between the garments without talking, it's okay. Let's say you spoke. You asked someone to pass you the beged, similar to asking, pass me the salt so I can make a maitzi. Of course you make a new bracha. It's part of the whole story. Let's say you just spoke stam. There are opinions amongst the paiskim. Now the Mishnah Berurah says, "V'das ha'machaber l'kom v'sifyu gimel v'magid Avraham ha'harim ben achrayim ayin shachir adeya ke ha'paiskim da'afilu sicha ba'alma gam kein havi b'chal hafsik levin zeh." The Mishnah Berurah says, "Stam talking is hafsik and it will require a new bracha." Avol, and we know that Avol the Mishnah Berurah is how he's paskening generally. Yesh min achrayim shepaiskim. There are achrayim, and over here in the Shari Tshuva, Shari Tziyani tells us this is the Taz, the Tvur Sharp, Megadim, and even the Goin as well. He says then the Goin is not machriya, but says the Mishnah Berurah, Yesh min achrayim shepaiskim t'kiyon di'yishayvim bezeh de'inzar lachzul avarich. Since there are those that hold you do not have to make a new bracha if you spoke between garments. Ta'avi k'moy shesach be'emsa asuda mutav shayachnes behefsek. It's better not to get involved in such a hefsek bracha. V'chein iskim apri megadim. L'chein yizoyer kolonim shel asuach. You should not talk. V'im diber ein chayzer umevarev. Shouldn't have a large hafsik. The asr ligram bracha she'netzricha kama misim reish tas vav. So you should not have a large hafsik. And this is really what we go back to what we said in the beginning of this year when you're putting your talis katan and then you're putting in your talis gadol. Part of the difficulty is you see the Mishnah Berurah here having extremes. On one hand, he says if you right away put in your talis gadol, then you don't make a bracha. Over here, he's saying when would you make a bracha if it's a large hafsik, a lot of talking, but a little bit of talking in a small hafsik. It sounds like you wouldn't make a new bracha, and this is the difficulty engaging the exact amount of time in the hefsek when you would make that bracha. Let's go back and let's learn some of the dirshus together. It says that number 27, the Mishnah Berurah taught us you should be mamashvish b'tzitzis, because that's as if you're wearing them a little bit, and then you make the bracha. And over here it says Mishnah Berurah, maybe a fairly common case, you put on your tzitzis or your talis between the parakim of Kriya Shema. Why would that be a case? Let's say you went to the bathroom and you come back during the brachas of Kriya Shema, during the prakim, of Kriya Shema, and you put on your towel. It says Mishmur, you can't make a bracha, and after davening, you're going to shake them a little bit and make the bracha. Similarly, if you have to put on your tefillin or tzitzis early in the morning, you're going to do the same thing. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Dirshu, note 28, quoting Moshe Feinstein, is this mishmush, is this dealing with the tzitzis ma'akev? Someone just goes and makes a bracha. Is that okay? Or he actually has to go and play with the tzitzis a little bit to make it as if he's wearing them? Says the Ramesha, no, it's just a hecker. It's not ma'akev in the mitzvah. It just shows us that the bracha you're making goes on the mitzvah. Says the Dirshu note 29, that someone who wears the talis katan, where you cannot make a bracha, you put on in a bathhouse or something. So again, you're going to put it on, and later on, as you walk outside, you will make the bracha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, note number 30. That if someone is worried that he's going to forget to make a bracha on his talis katan, says the Buchacha, very famous line of the Buchacha of the Isha Avram, Dirshu note 30, Sheyachal, listen to what he says, Sheyachal legaleis data pam achas over kol yamav. Once your entire life, right now, we're all sitting here learning together. You can think one time, always, when I make my bracha on talis gadol, yipater betach kamas the talis katan. You can make a bracha and have in mind once now for oil vayed on your talis katan. And similarly, the Das Torah writes when it comes to for the Ner Chanukah, he writes a similar thing that if one time you have such a minhag, it's okay. And okay, this might not be the most l'chatchila, but okay, right now as we're sitting here one time, so right now we're all thinking that the bracha talis katan goes back to talis katan. We're thinking that we have the right kavanah, etc. Dirshu note number 31 points out that Shlomo Zalman says that this is what we're saying on, that we don't make a bracha during the days of slichas on the talis gadol, even though there's a large weight between there and the talis gadol. And again, this is what we pointed out, that there's this little bit of a difficulty when to make the bracha on the talis gadol. If you're going to go right away and put on the talis gadol, what if it's not right away? It's a short amount of time. And this is Shlomo Zalman, etc. This is where it comes from, as we mentioned. If you're getting dressed and you're on the way to shul, it might take 10 minutes, it might take 20 minutes, it might take a half hour to drive there. But it's all in one process of going shul. Then you're going to make one bracha on the talis gadol and pater b'talis katan. But if you're having, let's say, a shiur, someone goes to daf yomi before davening, someone sits and learns before davening, someone's helping out with the kids before davening, so there's a separate amount of time, then you'll make the bracha on talis katan and a separate bracha on the talis gadol. Note number 32 quotes about wearing the tzitzis underneath your clothing. The Berurah says, the minhag is to put the talis katan under the clothing, and of course we'd be remiss if we didn't quote the Chazon Ish, of course, that's on top of the clothing. We know that in Bnei Brak, Chaim Kanievsky's Zatzal, of course, was makbid to wear the tzitzis on top of their clothing, like we see over here. What about wearing the tzitzis on your body, a very hot topic? So over here he quotes from the Zeich Yitzchak, you shouldn't do it, it might be a bazayon, and it can get sweaty. And he quotes over here from Chaim Kanievsky again that one should be careful about this. And he says, and we do have to point out, Dirshu doesn't point out, but many Paiskim, Rav Elyashiv, Bereisham, amongst others, or Shmuel Kamenetsky argue, and they say, Avada, it might not be the most l'chatchila to wear your tzitzis on your skin itself, but Avada, your yaitse, and we'll get to the undershirt shaila, we'll see the same thing, the undershirt tzitzis, that it's a beged, who cares that it gets a little bit sweaty? That was Rav Chaim's chiddush, that you're not yaitse, but of course, one is allowed to Medina, where Shlomo Zalman says the same thing, you let it wear the tzitzis on your skin. When it comes to the next Dirshu talks about taking your tzitzis in the pockets, and he differentiates between the pockets and in your pants. In your pants is where the Mishnah Berurah is screaming, etc. And then the Dirshu note number 34, we're running out of time, says regarding Resizim Maisa, use Charta Maisa, you should see the tzitzis, remember the tzitzis. And here is where the Dirshu quotes from later in Simon Chav Daled. This is one of the reasons you should be careful to wear a talis katan your tzitzis all day, because it's like a person should be careful. If you remind yourself, you tell your friend to remember something, what are you going to do? You're going to tie like a band to always remember it. So Hashem told us, remember the tzitzis, and gave us a reminder to wear the tzitzis, so we should be very, very careful with it. The next Dirshu number 35 discusses that the tzitzis is a chayves gavra. It's a chayv on the person, not on the beged. And now let's continue over here with regard to the hefsek in Dirshu note 37. Again, the shtika is not a hefsek. Dirshu note 38 quotes the different days in the Paiskim, and we have to mention this. Of course, we wrote a book in Chalal, so how could we be remiss if we didn't mention note number 38, that if you mafresh Chalal for many does, you're allowed to make one bracha that goes on all of them. Similarly, if you're being taivel many kalim, you're allowed to make one bracha that goes on all of them. Very, very similar halalachos, and we're going to stop over here. Yeah, we're going to, the Dirshu number 40, it's just a gishmak case. If the bracha itself could be the hefsek, if you think you need to make a second bracha, and you make a bracha, and you already made a bracha, is the bracha hefsek between the bracha and the drinking of the wine and kiddush, etc. Interesting case. We'll pick it up in the next year.